My first guest joins me in studio here. Mr. Jacques Tazabi is the CEO of Universal Detection Technology. The stock symbol's UNDT. Jacques, good to see you again.
Very good to see you, Don. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been about 5 years since we first looked at your company, so it's great to have you back. Now, the company describes itself as being in the business of developing monitoring technologies, and specifically bioterrorism monitoring technologies. Tell us about that.
That's right, Don. We principally develop, market, and sell detection technology and actual detection equipment for biological weapons. Most infamous of them is obviously anthrax, but also ricin and some other lesser-known types of biological weapons which have been used in the past or that we're afraid will be used. And as you may know, we recently just received certification from the Department of Homeland Security on our handheld detection equipment. We are now an approved security measure for the detection of biological weapons. But simply put, in layman's terms, I think the folks may want to hear is we detect the really, really bad stuff before people start dying. And I think that's what's important that people should know, is that there is something you can do. If we can detect these even once they're airborne, even once they're out there and in contact with people, the clock is just starting to tick, and we detect it in time where you can save lives.
And I found it really enjoyable researching the company prior to doing this interview. Now, the company announced that you're working with the U.S. Department of Commerce to market your anthrax detection equipment not only in places like Germany, but more recently in South Africa. I would assume that this is in preparation for the World Cup going on over there.
That is in preparation for the World Cup, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it also brings us to another theme, which this is not an American problem at all. There is need and interest for these detection equipment all across the world. We have a lot of interest from the Middle East, Europe, and we are now we're lucky to be working with the Commerce Department to market in South Africa in preparation for the World Cup. As some people may know, our detection equipment was used at the Beijing Olympics last year, and ordinary folks might not be realizing that, but these threats exist, and nothing happened at the Beijing Olympics, but the authorities do take every measure to prevent biological attacks, and we're proud that our equipment was used there, and we hope to successfully market in South Africa as well.
Well, we certainly do live in a different world these days. Now, how does your equipment actually detect airborne, as we'll call it, bad stuff?
Right. Well, it's primarily in two different ways, and the military classifies these as two separate types of detection. One is point detection, one is standoff detection. Our flagship product, the BSM 2000, is a standoff detection product, which basically sits in a HVAC unit or somewhere in an open space, constantly monitors the air, and within 15 minutes will let you know if there's been a spore event, such as a airborne anthrax attack that you wouldn't be able to see with the naked eye or smell or detect any other way except for something like this. The other one is point detection, which I think a lot of people are more familiar with. The quote, white powder scares, when the first responder actually has a sample to look at. They're usually delivered in the mail. Recently, a lot of the banks were getting it when we had all the financial troubles. And in essence, this will, in as little as 3 minutes, let you know what the powder you have in your hand is, specifically whether it's ricin, anthrax, or one of these other.
Or even if it's a false alarm, like it's Ajax detergent or something.
That's right, and I think a lot of people overlook it's not really the catastrophic loss of life, it's really the grinding halt that business and commerce or life comes to if this happens, and you need to know what it is.
Well, if you've got a 75-story building and someone opens an envelope in the 3rd floor, next thing you know, they're evacuating that entire building and blocking off a 3-block area, and if we find out through your system that this is nothing more than sugar.
That's right.
All of that could have been avoided.
You're absolutely right, and primarily our customers are the first responder agencies, but we are seeing more and more those individual companies or corporate headquarters have their own supply of our detection equipment, so they can, prior to alarming the law enforcement, which they'll always do anyway, it's a crime and it has to get reported, but even they have these on hand to be able to immediately detect to see what's going on.
Interesting. Universal Detection Technology, stock symbols UNDT, our toll-free number from anywhere in the world for free information, 888-259-4449. You know, now, Jacques, last week a very disturbing report came out, discussion of Al-Qaeda. They're still plotting, they're still planning, they're very active. It must make what you folks are doing right now just be all that more important.
It is important, and we try to maintain our vigilance in this area. And you're right, Don. That report, I know the one of which you speak, it was very alarming. And there's been many of these reports. A recent report came out that Al-Qaeda has been trying to create a way to smuggle anthrax in from Mexico through the same tunnels that traffic other things. And this is clearly bipartisan. I don't think this is anything coming from one side of the aisle. These are real threats that we need to be alarmed by.
Now, your anthrax detection technology, this is good news. You were recently awarded a U.S. patent. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's been a long time in the making, obviously, and it's part of our technology portfolio, which we've licensed from Caltech University. And it's actually our second patent that was already granted in our standoff detection system.
You know, it's interesting because it's been just about 8 years since the tragedy of 9/11, where everybody just kind of uses as a barometer of when terrorism really affected us here in the United States.
Okay.
And yet, 8 years later, our threat level here in the U.S. is still elevated. So while a lot of people may have become complacent about it, the governments aren't.
Well, yeah, and it's our place, I guess, to be somewhat complacent. We're humans and we need to move on with our life. We do trust our governments to not be complacent and to stay ahead of growing threats, not necessarily just reacting to threats we've had in the past, but anticipating things. And one of the things that happened after 9/11 was the 9/11 Commission, which I think is the undisputed most thorough panel ever assembled to deal with not with bioterrorism, but to analyze terrorism as a whole. And George Tenet, the head of the CIA at that time, the number one threat that they were talking about in the biological arena was an airborne anthrax attack. So it continues to grow, unfortunately.
So how's business? I mean, are you pretty pleased with the sales results at this stage?
Well, I don't think anybody should ever be pleased with their results because you have to continue to grow. But what I can say, and I'm happy to report, is what we've done, even just things that were taking us a few years but have come to fruition in the last 6 months, like you mentioned, the patent being granted. Just this year we were awarded onto the federal GSA schedule, making it much easier to sell to federal, state, and local governments. The certification from the Department of Homeland Security on our equipment is a wonderful thing. And we're starting to see a lot of interest from distribution firms. We just signed another deal in Germany with a firm that supplies NATO with a lot of this type of equipment. So I think we're on that launch pad now.
Quickly, can you describe a scenario where a terrorist organization might try to bring something in that your detection system could detect and perhaps possibly thwart?
We have dreamt up many scenarios to that effect, but if I had to pick one, I would say that I was actually watching a TV show about last year, and what they had was a mall here in Los Angeles where very easily you can walk on top of the mall or next to the mall and just release a few teaspoons full of anthrax spores, goes into the HVAC unit, and within minutes it's spread throughout the mall. Our detection equipment is meant to be in that HVAC unit and detect it within 15 minutes, stop the flow of air, and immediately alert the authorities.
A little less than a minute left, Jacques, but why is this a good time right now for folks to take a closer look at your company?
Well, like I said, it's been a while since we've been here, and it's been a while since we've been attacked with anthrax or other things. But that's also given our enemies a lot of time to develop things as well. We've seen ricin being made in a hotel room in Las Vegas out of castor beans. And with our recent certifications, our patents, and some of the distribution networks in place, I think it's an interesting time to take a look at us.
Well, it's interesting to have seen the progress with the company in the 5 years since we last looked at you. We're reinitiating coverage of the company. Be watching you very closely between now and the next 3 months. Looking forward to more updates. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don.